So Michael Sonato with a great article in The Guardian about some of the tactics and talking points made against unions, especially as workers for Verizon have been attempting to unionize for better pay and benefits. So unions are, for some reason, a little bit of a taboo subject in this country because apparently there's a lot of people, a lot of regular people who will be helped by unions that despise them. And I look, I guess there's a couple of reasons why. At least some of the talking points that I've heard that aren't necessarily reflected in Verizon, but one of them is, well, unions give all the money to Democrats. Now, is that true? I think a fair majority of it is true. And that's why, of course, I'm in favor of whenever somebody brings that up, well, let's get all money out of politics. So that, therefore, you're not going to have unions giving to Democrats. You're not going to have unions given to anybody. And that kind of levels the playing field for politics. Well, then what are you going to complain about? Well, there are certain union workers that are lazy and can't get fired. If that is true, well, then that's ridiculous, right? Because unions, yes, should protect employees, but they shouldn't necessarily protect the bad employees. And so that can be problematic, but that in itself is no reason to not be in favor of unions. So anyway, now, in documents given to managers and employees, Verizon encouraged its staff to use anti-union rhetoric, not the stuff that I mentioned, but other union rhetoric, anti-union rhetoric, and disparages previous unionization efforts within the company. Now, Sonato explains that several pages of these documents focus on the 6 Verizon retail stores in Brooklyn that voted to join the Communications Workers of America in 2014. Now, that is the first Verizon store to successfully unionize. So you have these, stores, these Verizon stores in Brooklyn that managed to successfully unionize, and that's fantastic. That's great. Now, apparently, Verizon obviously thinks, no, that's not great. That's terrible. We're going to use them as an example, and I'm going to show you how. Now, first, according to the documents, the employees in Brooklyn were highly influenced into voting for the CWA. They were swayed by a good sales pitch through empty promises and unrealistic expectations. Unfortunately, the union does not have to sell with integrity, and it was our Brooklyn employees who paid the price. Well, now, wait a minute. How did Brooklyn pay the price? Did all the employees lose their jobs? And that's part of the argument against unions. If you unionize, we're going to close the shop, you're going to lose all your jobs. Well, did that happen? No, it didn't. But before I get to what actually did happen, their rhetoric continues. They said, before you sign anything or even click submit online, think hard about joining a union and remember the story of your Brooklyn workers. Well, let me share that story. Now, what happened is, like I said before, they pushed for and successfully got a union in Brooklyn. So now they joined the Communications Workers of America. Just 2 years later, Verizon pushed for a union decertification vote in their Brooklyn stores. Now, that took 2 years to wind its way through the courts, and in 2018, workers ended up defeating that decertification. Now, that vote to disband the union, like I said, was pushed by Verizon in 2016 during strikes over a new labor contract 2 years after the union was first organized. Now, Monique Rochelle, who was an employee at one of the 6 Brooklyn Verizon wireless stores, who has been involved in the union since it first organized, said this, quote, "They were trying to divide us, creating programs and making false promises to some employees." Oh, now wait a minute. Hold on there. Wait. So they said, oh, the union's going to come at you making false promises. Now we're going to make false promises so you don't create a union. Methinks that is projection. That might be the very definition of projection. There's more. One of the human resources employees at Verizon was going around with the district manager, this is still Monique Rochelle, at the time to talk with employees about the vote. She was giving a lot of false information about the union. They were trying to divide us, and creating programs and making false promises, as I said before. Now, what was that false information? Well, apparently it included mischaracterizing how the union helped workers and claiming that a helpline for workers run by Verizon itself would provide the same services as the union. So, wait, you call this helpline? So you think you're not getting paid enough and you call the helpline. What do you think the helpline's going to do? Are they going to help make sure that you get better pay and benefits? No, of course not. That's run by the company. The whole point of the company is to save money so that they can funnel more towards their executives. That's what they do. But anyway, now Brooklyn apparently paid the price for the unionization. Not by, of course, having all the scare tactics by the company come true. They're still there. They're still operating. They're still profitable. But in the company attacking the union and attempting to decertify it, which would destroy all the organizers' hard work. Look, I don't know about you, but the fact that the workers voted against decertification and voted for keeping the union kind of tells you that they were very satisfied with how the union was operating. Weird. Now there's more. In a questions you may have section, I love that, Verizon offers further input against unions. The answers claim that the best way to secure jobs is to provide excellent product services and customer service, rather than join a labor union. But look, joining a labor union isn't about necessarily securing jobs. I mean, yeah, sure, that's a part of it. And another part is putting out excellent product services and customer service. However, here's the thing. Union is also about protecting the worker as well. So, and making sure that the people who work there get fairer pay and, worker protections and things like actual benefits and are treated fairly. That's the whole point. And look, by the way, the securing jobs thing, it's actually kind of a lie as well. It's not true. Look, in a lot of places, you have at-will employment. I know here in Michigan, they can fire you for any reason. If you join a union, you at least have some protection against being fired for literally no reason. So, nonetheless, Verizon claimed that the 2016 strike of workers at their Brooklyn retail stores and nearly 40 other thousand unionized employees who work as network technicians and customer service reps made working conditions worse, to which they provide no evidence or no examples to back that up. Oh no, it's just worse because we say it's worse. Because now we actually have to pay people fairly. I don't like that at all. Not only that, but the documents further explain Verizon's anti-union position. They said, quote, "We don't believe unions are necessary at Verizon Wireless, or that you or your coworkers will be well served by electing a union as your collective voice." Well, of course you would be saying that. You're Verizon, you're the company. Yeah, of course that's their position. Is anyone really surprised that that is their position? What they want you to do is they want you, if you have a problem, that you can negotiate with the company directly. And then if you ask for a raise, you can get either denied or fired. And that's it. Problem solved. Let's just hire a new person. Well, that's obviously not great for the worker. But anyway, Verizon argues the only difference between unions and non-union represented employees are the dues union members pay. Verizon defines a union as, quote, "an organization whose income comes from taking a portion of the wages from the employee it represents." I mean, look, I guess that's kind of how it works. And guess what they take that money and use it for? They use it to fight for you. And yeah, and of course, sometimes they use it to lobby politicians and, give to politicians. I said that before. And look, a lot of the times they end up giving to Democrats, mostly because a lot of Democrats, well, I guess not so many anymore, but a lot of Democrats traditionally had very pro-labor views and actually would work to get pro-worker legislation passed. Again, not so much today, now that we have a flood of corporate money in politics, which easily outstrips the amount of spending done by unions. Nonetheless, you want a solution, you get all the money out of politics. But anyway, now Verizon also added, quote, instead of treating employees as individuals, the company has to negotiate with the union on behalf of all employees collectively. And, like, that is somehow framed to be a bad thing. Oh, it's collectivism. It's socialism. That's the problem. Right. No, that's working as intended. The entire point is to make sure that you have strength in numbers. And that serves to put a worker on more of an even footing with the company that they work for. And that's the whole point of a union. That's the whole point. Not only that, but there's more in these documents. They also include training for managers on how to respond to pro-union activity. And how do they respond? Well, according to Latasha French, who is an employee, she claimed that Verizon sent union busters to harass her, give her misinformation, and offer false promises, like the possibility to work from home. French added the way Verizon Human Resources had handled complaints of harassment she had made, which included the supervisor joyriding in the wheelchair the company provided for her, had also contributed to her involvement in union efforts. Can you imagine that? You make complaints, and the guy's like, don't care. Hey, give me your wheelchair. Let me drive around in it for a while. That served to drive her towards getting a union. Now, she said, quote, I'm not afraid to go up against them because I know I do my job. I know I'm there and available. But what I won't stand for is you're making billions of dollars in our head and you treat us as modern day slaves and like we're uneducated. You're trying to consolidate other departments and you're not giving the people who take these additional duties any more pay. So that is, of course, the reason, or one of the reasons, one of many, that people seek to unionize, because they are not being treated fairly by the company, and oftentimes there is little recourse in a non-union shop. You can talk to everybody you want, but guess what? That doesn't mean anything's going to change, because it is just you versus the corporation, all of their lawyers, all of management, and all of human resources. So that's literally a David versus Goliath situation. And it amazes me that there are people out there that are like, oh no, that's fine. Yeah, I don't mind being David. Well, okay, but think of it this way then. And maybe that's a bad analogy, but think of the union as the slingshot. That sort of evens the odds a little bit. But anyway, there's more. In July of 2018, a Verizon retail store in Hazleton, Pennsylvania, voted to unionize successfully. However, Verizon's union-busting tactics stopped an effort to hold an election to unionize in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, around the same time. So one got a union, the other did not. Now, Daryl Givens, a Verizon employee at the Wilkes-Barre store, said, quote, we ended up pulling the petition. If we lost, we had to wait a year. It was initially 5-4. 2 people didn't want to be involved at all. Now, why was the vote like that? Well, misinformation, of course. He explained that Verizon sent executives to the store in response to union activity. He said the first thing they do is come in and say how awful the union will be for us. And if we go union, they can't do anything special for you. Well, again, with those false promises, right? Oh, no, so we can make special deals with just you specifically. Basically appealing to people's sense of selfishness. Well, maybe if I'm against the union, fuck all these other guys, these coworkers of mine. No. I'm just going to focus on me and what kind of deals, they're going to give me. The company will. And maybe they'll honor those deals, and maybe they won't. That's the problem of dealing with the company itself. Now, he also said they would come out and not directly say unions, sometimes their stores sometimes get closed, trying to entice us in any way to vote no. Given said, they would call us in, do forced meetings with us, and go over how awful unions are. Every few days, we'd get rotated back in. So again, taking away from productivity, going into forced meetings about how terrible unions are. Well, again, if you're coming from the company perspective, unions are terrible. If you're a worker, unions are the only ones that are actually on your side. Now, according to Tim Dubnow, organizing director for the CWA, this is how Verizon operates whenever they see union activity. He said, quote, "They distort the truth about unions. They imply union workers make less. I don't know how that happens. They distort the truth about dues and strikes. That's the union busting 101 when you walk into the door. They have a jump team ready at a moment's notice to have a forced captive audience meeting to warn about the dangers of unions." So now through all of that, let me show you what happens when you have unions versus what happens when you don't have unions. This is historical, right? So up until around the mid-70s, the United States had very strong unions. Then what happened? Well, we had a couple of different things happen. One, we had more money introduced into politics. Corporations became people, and they got speech rights. Then, and this is just a bit of a simple breakdown, and obviously there are other factors that contributed to it, but one of the biggest factors is when Ronald Reagan broke unions. You saw union membership decline, which corresponded to, as you can see, wages of good producing workers also went flat, while productivity continued to soar. All of that is related to the dearth of union activity that we have today. When you have strong unions, you have higher wages and benefits, and the income gap is a bit closer. When you don't have union representation, which we do here in America, right? We do not have strong unions. I think it's somewhere estimated about 10% of the private sector has union representation, and the people that have more union representation are actually public workers. So with such little representation for the average American, it's no wonder why our wages are stagnant. While people are stressed out and don't have health care, even people with employee-sponsored health care still end up paying massive amounts of premiums and have high out-of-pocket costs. That is what happens when you don't have representation. So, and of course, these companies, they desperately want to keep it this way because they are terrified of unions, because when workers actually have power, the executives can't extract everything that they can from those workers. They actually have to negotiate with a group that has the workers' best interest in mind. And unfortunately for them, that means less profit for shareholders and executives, and it means a more equal profit distribution. When you're dealing with greedy companies and greedy CEOs and shareholders, and look, I guess to call them greedy is not fair, because, and I know you're going to freak out about that, but these companies, you have to remember what they really are. They are machines. They are basically programmed with one objective: make profit at all costs to give that profit to the shareholders. So you have to have something to balance that out. And what balances it out are unions. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent progressive media.